I think it's a cultural thing because everyone was scared.
Scared.
Always.
Fear.
Sorry, it makes me really emotional. You could never know whom you could trust. And this built up so much anxiety that by the end of the day, you didn't even know whether you could trust yourself. I felt like I'm in a cage. I knew there was something outside, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I wanted to be free. One morning, I had told my parents out of the blue, when I grew up, I will go to America. They laughed at me. And as the wall came down, I truly believed that God had taken away the wall for me.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode. Such a special episode today of the CEO Show with your host, Bryce Henson. I am here with my dear friend, Dr. Petra Frese. Dr. Petra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm super excited. We're streaming live here in Beverly Hills, California. And the reason that is we are at a mastermind event, which we met earlier in the year. And by the way, friends, this is, I think, technically episode 180 of my podcast, but the third episode of the CEO Show podcast. So I want to strongly recommend for the full story and how I met Petra, which I'll give you the cliff notes here, to rewind back or go to 3 episodes back, episode 177, which is the first episode, the origin story of the CEO Show, where I give the overview of meeting Petra. But I'll give you the cliff notes now. And I've been on this journey of passion and purpose, which we're going to talk about because Petra is also a leadership expert. She integrates spirituality and finding your purpose, which I think is very serendipitous. So through a series of a lot of different, I guess, awakening and searching, I've kind of uncovered my passion for business, for leadership, and I've seen some things that were really interesting. I've noticed them in the last decade or so, but it's hyper-focused in the last 5 years, that conscious capitalism has gotten a bad name, and there's ideas like communism and collectivism that have become very popular. And through a series of events, which again, I want to encourage you to check out the episode that launched on July 3rd, episode 177, gives the full story. But long story short, as I'm going through this journey, if you can believe, through a series of events, one of the crescendo moments is that I enroll into the Harder Series Mastermind. And out of the 100 people in the group, there are 8 individuals that were on the VIP part of the program. And I was excited at this particular, event, but I was a little, I guess, apprehensive. Should I enroll in the VIP or not? And as it turns out, we arrive on a beautiful morning in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we meet Chris and Lori, who I've previously friends with, and a host of other people. And if you could believe, Petra's sitting next to me. And as you hear her German accent, we started talking. And when she was telling her story, I'm very curious. I come to find out that Petra, especially after hearing her story, her husband Dirk, who I just got a chance to meet before the camera turned on, they grew up in different worlds. And I thought it was really interesting hearing the different worlds, even though they come from the same country and really the greater grand city of Berlin. You grew up in the East Berlin side, and Dirk, your husband, grew up in the West Berlin side, which are night and day apart. In fact, the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. I believe you were 23 years old. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Which is just unbelievable to me. So this all to say, that's kind of the context of the show. And this was also one of the crescendo moments where after meeting you, I had been feeling and thinking all these particular things. And then like a light bulb that came down the sky, I knew this is exactly what I need to do. I need to chat with you on the podcast. I need to rebrand the podcast. So here we are, episode 3 of the CEO podcast with Petra. And really going to unpack the box just a little, tell our audience about your story and your background. It's just a beautiful thing. So with all that without further ado, can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, your what it was like growing up in East Germany? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. And yes, it was a light bulb moment also for me to re-evaluate what has happened since me born in eastern part of Germany in a very, very rural area. I went to Berlin, to East Berlin, as I started studying at the university. Before that, I was in an even more eastern part of Germany, right? I grew up in a very small village, very rural, and I worked my way up to finally end up in East Berlin. So I moved from that little village to the next bigger city today is Chemnitz, formerly Karl-Marx-Stadt, and then to Berlin, where the wall was still up. So life was very different compared to life on the other side of the wall, where Dirk, my husband, grew up. So it was two different worlds.
And growing up in this particular element, did you have a good understanding what life was like on the west side of Germany?
To me, it was only hearsay. I knew people that traveled to the West for specific reasons, family events also, or people who've been member of the Stasi, the Ministry of State Security. Mm-hmm. So they got specific paperwork that they could travel.
From east to west?
From east to west for specific reasons. Mm-hmm. We couldn't. We means my parents and myself. So what I knew about West Germany and West Berlin was only what other people told me. We didn't have a TV, never. All my entire life I spent with my parents. My grandparents had a TV, and we could only see certain channels that had been approved by the German government, by East German government.
Censored by the East German, which is a common kind of topic of this particular conversation about censorship, which is a very dangerous thing, right? And this is why I'm so passionate about freedom of speech. So you've lived it, and I think, Petra, I was so touched by the story. I've never met anyone that grew up in East Germany, and it was just a serendipitous moment of all these thoughts. And my family escaped from communist Poland over 100 years ago, so I had some context. But meeting someone in the flesh, right, it was just so inspiring to me. So continue on. Like, what was it like? What was the feel? Did you have siblings? What was the culture and the environment of that time?
I do not have any siblings. I'm the only child of my parents, and it was very hard. With hindsight, I think my parents' life at that time was very hard, which I did not understand as a little one growing up, right? I understood that my parents been always stressed. There was no real conversation, at least I couldn't comprehend with the analytical mind, but I could feel that this was not a true conversation. It was only something that you couldn't say, or that you felt there was something but nobody talked about. Then my parents sometimes been angry and I didn't really understand why. And the reason being was oftentimes that there was not available what they needed or wanted. They couldn't buy it. And it was not necessarily the question that we didn't have the money. I grew up in a very poor household, so money was always an issue. But the bigger issue was, even if my parents had the money, they couldn't get what they wanted.
Why?
It was not available.
Not a free market capitalist society.
Not a free market. We never had to go to bed hungry. We always had food on the table, but there was not a variety. We always had white bread and we always had pork.
That was the staple of your diet.
Exactly. But fruits, around Christmas time, we could get free bananas because our family was a family of three, mom, dad, and myself. And if we've been really lucky, they counted grandma and grandpa because we lived in the same house.
Mm-hmm. So you get 5 bananas.
If we were really lucky.
Petra, this is crazy. I was just talking to my business partner, Bedros, who, again, revert back to the episode previously, who told his origin story of escaping Soviet Union communism, coming here. And we were at an event in Utah about a month ago, and we were with some Ukrainian immigrants that kind of came from the very similar type. And the first time they were sharing me, when they migrated to the States, they stopped through Italy, and the first time they had bananas, and they were just like over the moon. So this is the second time I'm hearing this within a 30-day period, which for me, and if you're listening to this video, you probably take eating a piece of fruit like a banana or orange for granted, but this is not, this is a situation that cannot be taken for granted in certain parts of the world or certain economic systems like you grew up in.
Exactly. And if we had a choice, if there was a choice, we could choose either having bananas for one person, one banana for one person, or an orange, one for one person. But it was not available to have bananas and oranges.
So either or.
Either or.
And delicacy.
Yeah.
What did your parents do? Like, what were their livelihoods? And
both of my parents worked, and they both worked in, the English term in mechanics. They been in servicing and repairing medical instruments.
Okay.
And both worked full time. And there was no opportunity to increase the income. This is what you get paid for this job. And we had a job, my parents had a job, and they didn't have to worry to lose their job tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of safe, but there also was no wiggle room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you do, this is what you usually do for your entire lifetime, and this is the money you earn every month. And you don't have to worry, right? The money you earn, this is your money, because everything was deducted. Health insurance was deducted, insurance was deducted for your home, and there was also no choice. There was one insurance. This is what you had to pay for your home insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Never had to think, you never had to make any decisions because the government took care of your personal decisions. Which with hindsight, some people, and I'm really getting agitated about that, some people glorify that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to choose what's the best insurance, what's the best healthcare, what's the best for that particular family situation or for the business. But we never learned it. As I started learning to make decisions, that was a completely new thought process for me. The only decision I had to make, do I want to eat the white bread today or don't I?
That's unbelievable. And it reminds me, I just read a book called I forget the name of the title. Something about escaping to live, and Yumi Park is a North Korean defector, and she gives a similar story about actually being overwhelmed with the amount of choices, which is mind-blowing because that's just never something I grew up with, or probably most of you listening to this or watching this have ever had some sort of context around that. Let me ask you this, and when you're describing your family, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it sounds just very cold, like a very cold environment. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it's absolutely fair. And of course, it's a personal opinion, right? Mm-hmm. What I consider cold is probably not what my parents consider cold.
Right.
I think my parents really wanted to raise me in a warm environment compared to their upbringing. But from my perspective, it was cold.
It was cold.
Yeah.
And then do you think like the era of communism and just the whole kind of government restriction, do you think that was isolated specific to you, or is that just the culture of that environment?
I think it's a cultural thing because everyone was scared.
Scared.
Always.
Fear.
Exactly. Because you could never know, and sorry, it makes me really emotional, you could never know whom you could trust. And this built up so much anxiety that by the end of the day, you didn't even know whether you could trust yourself. What was it really that you were thinking, feeling, what we wanted, what we needed, what we wished for? It was very, very scary.
When you said you didn't even know if you can trust yourself, I was actually blown away. I thought you were going to say you couldn't even trust your family, let alone yourself. So you even in that particular culture had second thoughts on trusting your parents.
Absolutely, yes. My parents taught me, I would say as long as I can remember, I don't know when it started, but always, you can't say that. Shh, shh.
You cannot.
You cannot. You cannot. Shh. And this was in our home, right? And for me to learn what I can say at home and what I can say outside of the home or not can say in the home, that inside the house I couldn't say things when we had guests, that I couldn't say things when my grandparents were visiting, not the ones that lived with us in the house. I learned very early that this is not the conversations for the parents that lived with us in the same house. But my mother's parents, when they visited, I couldn't say the things that I did say with my parents and vice versa. So this led to so much insecurity that I really lost trust.
And what were you afraid of? What were the repercussions? I remember, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, when I first met you in Arizona, you told me a story of like a neighbor going to jail. Yeah. If you can elaborate there, or just in general, what were you scared of?
I was scared because I was scared and didn't really know before this thing happened what the punishment would be. But then the story I shared with you, I was maybe 7. If I was old, I was 8. And the father of a friend of ours had told a joke. And a day or 2 days later, he disappeared. And I learned later that he was imprisoned because of telling that joke, that someone had heard him telling that, and the government imprisoned him for that. And it was, maybe I can say it, I don't know, it was a joke about blonde females. It was not a political thing.
Really? Mm-hmm. So then that element of fear in studying other, communist type company or countries like North Korea, like East Germany, like Cuba, I want to say, do government in that particular environment, do they have different molds, or do they kind of enlist the help of other people to figure out who's saying? I guess I'm just curious on how that would kind of go up the food chain and how the government controls that, I guess is what I'm curious about.
Yes. So this Stasi, Staatssicherheitsdienst, the Ministry of State Security, they had, I hope I remember this correctly, they had one spy for each 50 to 60 people. So one spy on 50 or 60 people.
Really?
That was the number. I didn't know at the time, but I wanted to understand why so many people worked for the Stasi. How was this possible? And why so many people could travel compared to what I thought we couldn't, right? So my parents were not members of the Stasi, and we could never travel. But so many people could. Parents of my classmates and
like throughout East Germany to West Germany, different countries. Where could they travel to?
To West Germany.
That's it.
Yes. At least this is what I know of, right? We could travel to Czechoslovakia. We could go to Hungary, to the eastern part. Mm-hmm. We could, but not to the western part. And learning that a spy had just to observe 50, maybe 60 people, right? This is a small amount of people.
Yeah.
So that's why the feeling of constantly living in surveillance was actually real. I had those times where I thought, I get crazy. Maybe this is all made up in my mind. But it was not. And this, I think it really shaped me, my life, my character, and my approach to life tremendously.
How so?
I wanted to change that. I did not like, and still do not like, to live in fear. Mm-hmm. And not just for myself, also for my parents, right? Growing up, becoming older and more questioning what was happening, I wanted to understand why my parents acted how they acted. I wanted to understand their worries. I wanted to understand why they always shushed me. Mm-hmm. And the political aspect is most certainly the biggest one. Yes, it's also the area where I grew up. People were not really open there. And my parents had conversations with neighbors that I thought were much more warm-hearted than the conversations they had with me.
Really?
But I found out that it was a give and take. They had these superficial conversations to get help from someone or buy something from someone, what they had, what we needed, and vice versa. It was kind of this culture of bartering. Is this the right term?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And to keep that relationship alive, they had nice conversations, but only superficial.
What were they bartering in terms of different services, products?
Products, what they needed, wood, bricks, for instance. If someone had a hose that was broken, you couldn't go and buy a hose or a faucet or something. You needed to figure out which neighbor had something.
There's no free market, there's no capitalism.
No, absolutely not. The entire year, oh my gosh, I could go on for on and on. The entire year, whenever we could purchase a package of tissues, we did. And we put it in a box because eventually someone would get a cold, and we needed that paper tissues. But we couldn't go and buy paper tissues, not to talk about choose which brand, which size, which smell. No, we had to collect them, we buy them, gather them the entire year, so that we were prepared for the season when we had a cold, that we could use those really soft, ironically, really harsh paper tissues. And I created a museum, I called it a museum, for my future kids, so that they could see how the quality of certain products in the German Democratic Republic felt. There was a package of paper tissues, there was a dust thing, it was really harsh. If you dusted something, you had scratches on the table. Yeah, I kept this for many, many, many years, and I showed our daughter.
That is unbelievable. You had to ration tissue paper because of the economic oppression of what you grew up with.
Yeah.
If you could describe, just in one or two sentences, like when you look back, 30,000 foot view, when you look back at your life, 30, 40 years ago through this particular environment, how would you describe it, from your perspective?
I was very frustrated. It was frustrating, and it was I felt like I'm in a cage. I knew there was something outside, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I wanted to be free. I would say I was born with that feeling. I need freedom. I need freedom of speech. I need freedom of travel. I need freedom of thought. And I'm absolutely against violence. So freedom to me includes respecting other people, respecting other people's wishes, how they want to live. It's not me telling everyone needs to value freedom as high as I do, but I wanted to have that freedom for me and the people that are close to me and want the same, to have that freedom.
Amen, my friend. And this is the essence of this show. You are so inspiring. I'm just so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you. Me too. Sorry for being so emotional. It's really important.
It's great. Kind of transitioning, speaking of freedom, let's talk a little bit about the Berlin Wall. I want to say November 9th, 1989. We had very different perspectives. I was a little boy. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I remember my mom glued to the TV and the wall was going and everything, it just looked like, chaos, but also happiness. And there was a lot of things going on. And I was a young boy, I didn't fully understand that. You're a 23-year-old woman at that point. You lived the first 23 years up until that point in East Germany. The wall goes down. Talk to us about that. Can you describe it, where you were, what your thoughts were, what your family's reaction were? Take us back to that place.
I lived in Berlin, in East Berlin. I studied at the Humboldt University at that time. And let me circle back a little bit. As I was 9 years old, one morning I had told my parents out of the blue, when I grew up, I will go to America. And they laughed at me. And they told that story a million times, making fun of me. And as the wall came down, I stood there thanking God. And at that time, I was not raised as a believer. But this was the first thing I had that, and now I'm making fun of myself. I truly believed that God had taken away the wall for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Incredible.
This was really, I thought this is for me because, of course it was for other people too, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I had, until that day, I didn't really know what praying is.
Actually, let's interject there. What's the religious makeup of East Germany at the time? Is there a prominent religion there with your family or just in the community?
No, not that I know of. So my parents gave me the freedom, talking about freedom, not telling me if or what they believed in. So they always told me, you will find out for yourself, which was freedom. But at that young age, maybe it was a little too much freedom, no guidance at all, right? So I learned very early that there's the Communist Party and this is better what you follow, these are the rules, and if you want to make a career, whatever career means in socialism, that's the religion. It's not a religion, but that's what you follow, right?
Yeah.
And I heard about God, and I heard about Catholic Church and the Protestants, but there was no real guidance in my family, and I didn't know how to come to a conclusion if God exists or not, and what that term was. And there was a very strong fight or friction inside of me, because as a very little girl, I talked to spirits, to angels, how energies, higher power. I didn't know any term until I learned at around age 4 that not everyone did that. I thought it's normal. I thought everyone would do that. And then again, I was told, shh, you have to stop that. And so I was very confused also about that.
Oh, yeah.
And as the wall came down, my initial thought was, thanks God. And then it disappeared. Then it was that chaos, that internal struggle. Now the wall is down. What do I do now, right? I'm in East Berlin. I had started to build a life there. I was at the university. What do I do? Do I go to the West? What do I do with my family? They count on me. I cannot leave them alone. They didn't want to come with me. It was another fight inside, right? It was another fear. I wanted to make the right decision and I didn't know what. And it was also that sadness. I was already 23 years old, right? And it's so late in my life that the wall came down. And I really didn't understand the system. I didn't know what's available there. It was so overwhelming. It was so overwhelming. And I was in Berlin that day and we needed a visa.
A visa.
A visa.
To get to West Germany.
To get to West Berlin.
Or excuse me, West Berlin, yeah.
Yes. There have been tiny holes, smaller than a regular door, in the wall where we could pass. And there was control people, and we needed a passport with a visa in the passport. So I queued in line to get that visa for at least 5.5 hours. I remember that, but I don't know exactly the time. I know it was more than 5.5 hours, and it was cold, right? It was November.
Oh yeah.
So then I got that stamp, that visa in my passport, and then I went with my passport and the visa to this hole in the wall to cross to the western side of Berlin. And by that time it was dark already. So the first time that I set foot on West Berlin earth, it was dark and I was shaking. I was so emotional, and so many people, and a lot of people were celebrating on the streets. The West Berlin people, they brought champagne and
People from the West were cheering as well.
Exactly.
Were they like welcoming you in?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
Absolutely. This was, it was unbelievable. It was one big party.
And who were you with? Were you by yourself? Were you with family? With friends?
I was with my partner at the time, with my boyfriend at the time. And he didn't want to go to the West.
No.
No.
Why?
Later I found out that his parents worked for the Stasi.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So let's talk us through that. So you experience West Germany.
Yeah.
The Berlin Wall falls. It's interesting because in certain times of liberation like this, there's also so many changes and challenges that go with it as well. So on one hand, it's such an exciting time. On the other hand, you know, to your point, there's so many decisions, there's so much going on, there's so much uncertainty, and also too, you know, you're trying to figure out kind of what the next step is. So how did that unfold? And I'm curious, like, as that unfolded on your journey, Like, what was the dichotomy after you started experiencing East and West? What became very apparent to you? I would imagine it probably would take a little time to process everything, but would just love your experience of like passing through that, what life was like, what did you do next, and then what was your perspective on both?
Extremely overwhelming. There was color and there was variety and clothes, the colors. We had clothes in the eastern part, but they've been mainly dark, right?
Oh yeah.
Different shades of gray, different shades of brown.
Like the clothing.
Yes.
Just even the colors of clothing
Yes.
are very limited in nature.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And my mom made nice clothes herself, and she found some fabrics with patterns. So this was the exception. But coming to the West, it was in all colors you could imagine. Right?
So when you say colors, meaning like physical colors, from what's your experience?
White, yellow, orange, red, green.
Just the stuff that we experience
Yes.
on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is new to you.
Absolutely new to me. And there was not one blouse in your size. If you were lucky, you found a blouse or a sweater. No, you had a million blouses in your size, in different colors, different styles, different fabrics.
Free market capitalism, friends.
Yeah,
Woo!
yeah.
Right?
Bananas, oranges, and nobody counted them. We didn't have the money, the currency at the time. But if you had the money, you could buy whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no salesperson telling you, your family are free, only free bananas. No, you could, if you wanted, you could purchase a box of bananas. Different toilet paper. I'd never seen in my life multiple brands of toilet paper. I remember that my grandpa cut the newspaper that we used as. Yeah. So it was from whatever you could imagine. Pharmacies, different things. If you had a stuffy nose, if you had a sore throat, you could go to the pharmacy and they had different things that would help you with a sore throat.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that this existed. Really no idea. It was very overwhelming, in a good way, and also in a way that really challenged me.
Yeah.
And the decisions, right, the small ones. What do I eat tomorrow? This is a small decision. So many meats, different meats you could choose, right? So many different fruits, so many different breads. The small things, but also the big decisions. What do I do now? Do I continue and finish my studies at the university in East Berlin? Or do I move today because maybe if someone builds up the wall tomorrow, what happens then?
Oh, yeah. What was that like? Was there a fear that potentially it could come back?
Yeah, big fear.
How long did that last for before it kind of reality set in that it's probably not going to come back anytime soon?
I think for me it settled as I moved to the West.
How long ago was that?
It was 5 years later.
5 years later.
Yeah.
So for a solid 5 years, there's still that thought in the back of your mind,
Yeah.
like it could revert back at any time.
Yeah. And I don't know if anyone else had that.
Right.
At least
That's
this
just
is
your
what it was for
experience.
me. Yes. And I started working at the Western University sooner in 93. 4 years after the wall came down, I got a job at the Technical University in West Berlin, starting my PhD, and I think it got a little easier for me because I went to work every day to the West, right? It became a little more...
But you're still living in the East at that point.
Yes.
So you're still living in the East Germany, but then you're getting your PhD in the West Germany.
Yeah.
Like, did you have to cross, I mean, the wall's gone. Was it just straight transport, or did you have to, was there any blockades, or was it just normal passing?
It was normal, absolutely normal passing.
Okay.
So it was probably not realistic to fear that the wall would be built or closed again. But
psychology, like psychologically, you've
Yeah.
experienced that for 23 plus solid years.
yeah. So it was actually only 3 years. I went to West in 92. Okay, sorry, let me correct that. It was only 3 years. Yeah.
On the same vein, and kind of, looking back, and it's interesting, when we first met, you told me a lot about your husband, Dirk, who I just met before with Pablo, my good friend who shoots video, and just a colorful guy. It was just really great connecting with him. Something that was touching to me, which I didn't fully know, but when I first met you, Petra, like, I'm still so mesmerized and so interested in you and so grateful for the story and grateful for you being, sharing it. I just assumed that your life in terms of East Germany and West Germany would just be topic of conversation. But what I just learned from you and Dirk is that it wasn't actually the case. Mm-hmm. That, since meeting me and, me diving into the conversation, it really sparked up a lot of conversations.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about, what those conversations look like? What was his perspective? What was your perspective? I didn't even also know that there's still a little bit of stigma between East Germans and West Germans in terms of just the time and the different culture and the different mindset and psychology. So can you talk a little bit about, after meeting me and having some of these conversations, what did that look like?
You actually pushed me in a really emotional turmoil, right? Because I had very successfully managed to put all those memories really far back in my mind. I didn't want to think about that anymore.
Why?
Because I didn't like it. It made me very angry. All the limitations, what I understand now, like, our life was extremely limited. It's the opposite of freedom. There was no choice, right? And this made me very angry, and I didn't want to deal with that because I thought that the anger might continue to limit me, and I didn't want that. And what I also know about myself is that anger really motivates me. If I channel it in the correct way, what I usually do, some exceptions exist, of course, but usually anger is a real good motivator for me, fuels my engines. But that topic, we had different opinions on it. Dirk was raised very against socialism.
Dirk's family.
Yeah. And they didn't want me in their family because they probably didn't know much about me and the Eastern part and the Eastern culture. Maybe a little more than I knew. Than I knew about them, but not really. So there was this apprehension. And still to this day, our circle of friends are different. We have just a handful of friends that are really close friends to both of us. After all those years, right? We've been married more than 30 years now.
Yeah.
And it's still a topic. My parents learned to love Dirk. They love him more than they love me. And I had to learn to accept that, to see that this is actually a good thing. So it was a very emotional process on multiple levels. And also how we approached life, how we approached our career, right? Dirk is good in a business setting, in a team. He's really good in a team. I had to learn that because in a team you need to trust.
Oh yeah. Yes. In a team, you need to trust.
Yeah.
Trust is the foundation of leadership. Trust is the foundation for teamwork and organization.
Absolutely.
And that's just interesting. When I heard you say that, I was like, well, of course. But then I connected the dots. In the way you grew up, there was a lack of trust.
Yes.
There was a lack of trust.
Always.
Yeah.
Omnipresent.
Yeah.
And to build that, right, and to learn to trust other people required to first learn to trust me again, to trust my instincts, to trust my intuition, to trust my feelings, and to trust that I would be safe if I say what I feel, what I think, what I want. And that was a pretty tough process for me. And talking about our upbringing and the history and the cultural differences brought all these emotions to the surface again.
Oh yeah.
And oftentimes we struggle with things that we didn't understand or didn't talk about. Why are we approaching things so differently, right? If Dirk goes to the store, he needs a new shirt, he goes to the store, he sees the shirt, his size, the color he likes, he purchases it. Mm-hmm. And me, I go to the store, I want to see the entire variety before I make a decision. It's really, and it drives him crazy. So we talked about this a lot.
So to put a bow on this particular part of the conversation, I want to lead us into kind of present day and your practice and leadership training and spirituality. What's your relationship with freedom, free market capitalism, as it pertains to your thought process and your relationship with socialism and censorship?
I have a very clear opinion to that. I hate censorship. I'm against socialism. I'm very pro-capitalism. And I'm very pro-freedom, freedom of speech. I have to add here, I also am very pro-respect.
Touché.
I believe capitalism lived in a good way can do so much good that socialism will never be able to do.
Why do you think that?
Because making money, this is part of being capitalist, right? Making money, creating things. And you use that money in a good way. What can you do for humanity? Whom can you help, support, education, innovation, development? Yes, of course, people use the money to create weapons.
Oh, yeah.
And use them against other humans. That's why I think respect is so important. Respecting life, respecting other people.
I like to reference as conscious capitalism, and that's,
Yes.
for me, that's an adjective that really describes using a tool, and I think it's just a tool, right?
Yeah.
You can use a tool for the bad, you can use a tool for the good.
You can use a hammer to destroy something or to build something.
Amen. And I would imagine, and we all have our thoughts and beliefs around world views, but your life view certainly shaped that.
Yeah.
And what would you say today, and granted this is a general statement, but for people that are supporting socialistic ideas and supporting censorship, and I think in many ways good intention, from what I can tell, I just think it's a lack of perspective, and that's me sharing my perspective, but I would curious on yours.
It might be a lack of perspective or also a lack of balance, right? With censorship, yes, guiding what you think is the right thing, sharing your opinion, and inviting other people to respect that and maybe use the specific terminologies, for instance, is different than telling people you can't say certain words anymore. Why not? It's not all negative and it's not all positive. Why do we take away the freedom to explore all the different aspects and choose what serves us well, us as a society, us as humanity? Why limitations? Why are we so low in self-regulation that we need these limitations given from someone outside of me? I don't understand that. And I really think people who glorify socialism, they most of them have not lived it. They don't have the experience. And yes, the grass is always greener on the other side. So if you never lived within the limitations, you probably don't know how bad it can be.
And Petra, it's interesting, I never lived in that particular environment. I lived in a figurative sense of socialism, being my father was an alcoholic, a drug addict, so there was an element of fear and censorship, but in a figurative way, because I grew up in the United States of America, which is very pro-capitalism in the grand scheme of things. So it's interesting, I can't relate, but one of my passions, and I don't know why I'm so touched. Maybe it's my family, migrating from communist Poland over 100 years ago, showing up to this country, not speaking a lick of English, moving from Pennsylvania, ironically, to Detroit, Michigan, when Henry Ford opened the T-model assembly line, that immigrant edge story. Maybe that's what strikes me most, but I just am so inspired by your story and people like you that have lived that, and that's a pillar of the show. It's really to promote capitalism, promote freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and also, too, to shine a light on the challenges and the horrors of socialism, of collectivism, of censorship. And one of the best ways I know how to do that is by connecting with amazing people like you to share your story, because you've experienced, not me.
And it shapes people's lives, right? I knew from a very young age onwards that I wanted to become a medical doctor. This was my passion. I really knew that I wanted to be a medical doctor. And I couldn't. Not because I didn't have good grades, not because I didn't put the efforts into it, because the government told me, your parents are not in the Socialist Party, you will not be able to study medicine. So the government told me, what we need is engineers and scientists. So then I studied engineering and became a scientist. My real passion,
As a medical doctor.
yeah, is healing people. This is what I do now in a different way. I'm not a medical doctor, but...
Well, let's segue here for the last part of the conversation, because I want to bring our audience up to present day. Also, too, you're a corporate trainer, a leadership expert. One of the principles of this show is also to teach leadership as well. So can you kind of bring us up to present day? What do you do? And I want to talk a little bit about leadership and some of your experiences with it.
I have a private practice, and I work mainly with executives and entrepreneurs on whatever the problem is, whatever the limitation is that they are facing right now. And I use different modalities. I teach communication, body language, micro-expressions. But I'm certain you have learned in a very young age already, reading your dad, right? Not knowing what the next second might bring. Mm-hmm. So this is how we became experts in reading body language and expressions. So, yeah, this is in a nutshell. It's leadership training, supporting leaders to develop their leadership skills and to trust themselves.
I want to ask you a specific technique that we talked a little bit off camera that I would love for you to demonstrate. Before I do, one of the things that really speaks to me, because I like to think I'm a passionate guy. Mm-hmm. I love business, I love leadership, I love people, I love teamwork, but I also believe in following your heart, following your passion, following your purpose, because that's where bliss lies. And this is something you teach as well. So how, from your perspective, Petra, from high performers that you teach and coach, how do you align and coach them so that way they're executing the things they need to do to move their business, their organization forward, but it's also very aligned with their purpose? And I'm sure there's a spirituality approach as well, but would love some insight there.
Yeah, absolutely. And when high performers feel stuck, oftentimes they made a decision that led to a division between their passion and purpose and what they actually do in their business. And the more they dissect from their soul path, what the soul intended to do in this lifetime, the more they lose track, the more they feel stuck. Mm-hmm. The more problems they feel, the more symptoms, the more challenges they face. And realigning what they are meant to do here on earth, what their soul passion is, and what they actually do. This solves a lot of problems. This heals a lot of trauma. A lot of things go back to trauma, childhood trauma. I don't want to blame everything on childhood trauma. Don't get me wrong, this is very common now, very popular, but this is not what I mean. But oftentimes that's the root cause of problems we develop, symptoms we see, right? And when the analytical mind takes over and we think this is what we need to do for our business, for our people, for our career, for whatever, And if this is not in alignment with our soul path, we face challenges and we feel stuck because the soul wants us to come back to what our soul's mission, our passion actually is. And then we sometimes have to pivot. And the pivot is hard, right? Because you want to go this route, but your soul decides, you would be better off here. And then we have to pivot and align that again.
It's a $1 million question. This is certainly, something that you do and you have experience training, but how do you do that? How do you really realign someone with their purpose?
It's a process, as you say, right? It's multiple techniques that go together. And one exercise that I really think is one of the easy exercises, and with easy, I don't mean it's easy, it's probably more simple than easy to do. But it is tied into the foundation to rebuild, regain trust. And this starts with trust in ourselves, because the more challenges we face, the more doubtful we become, and the more we question ourselves, right? So coming back to understanding, who am I? What do I want for my business, for my people, for my employees, for the people I serve, for my clients, for everything. Coming back to that understanding and rebuilding trust in ourselves. There is an exercise that I teach all my clients. Can I invite you?
You can.
To do this with me?
Yeah.
In an ideal setting, we stand up. Maybe in front of the mirror. You can use me now. I'm your mirror right
beautiful.
now. Feet shoulder width apart. And you inhale deeply, and you put your hand with your flat side on your throat. And you say something that you know is true for you, right? For you is, my name is Bryce.
My name is Bryce.
Yes. And slowly you move your hand downwards, put it on your body, and slowly, and repeat that sentence. My name is Bryce.
My name is Bryce.
And feel the vibration.
My name is Bryce. My name is Bryce. My name is Bryce. And for those of you listening to audio, I have my neck and my throat, and I'm just moving it down towards my heart as I'm repeating this saying. My name is Bryce. It's something I know to be true.
Exactly. And do you feel the vibration when you speak? You feel it in your chest?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, move down with your hand. Continue speaking until you don't feel the vibration anymore.
My name is Bryce. My name is Bryce. My name is Bryce.
Do you still feel it?
A little bit.
Yes, it becomes less intense, right?
Yeah.
You are almost at your belly button, right?
Yeah.
And now please do the same exercise. And please say, my name is Petra. We both know it's not your truth, right?
Yes.
And repeat the same thing. Put your hand on your throat, start up there. Say it out loud. My name is Petra.
My name is Petra. My name is Petra.
My name
is Petra. My name is Petra.
And pay attention to the vibration.
My name is Petra. My name is Petra. It's much less. My name is Petra. My name is Petra. My name is Petra.
And you don't feel it anymore, right? It's at the sternum where you stop.
Yep.
And the difference in your height, you feel what's true for you down to your belly button.
Yeah.
And what's not true for you, you feel up to your sternum, right? And oftentimes people, if they don't have that body with so much volume in your lungs, you exercise a lot, you have amazing lungs, right? You can feel it fall down. If people are not as good in shape as you are, ideally, if you can feel the vibration down to your sternum, this is your inner truth.
Down your sternum.
Yes. And if it stops higher up, then it's not your inner truth. So this is how you can find out if something that you are telling yourself is your inner truth or just your analytical truth.
It's connecting vibrations.
Exactly. So your body is the oracle. Your body tells you if this is what you believe is true, is actually in alignment with your inner truth, with your soul.
And that from your practice in teaching entrepreneurs in high performance is mission critical towards alignment, towards fulfillment, towards success and bliss.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we think I have to do this project, I have to do this corporation, I have to do whatever, the tasks, test with yourself. Your higher self knows. Is this really what you have to do, or is it more distraction or out of fear or for whatever reason? And if it's your inner truth, follow that.
That's the target.
Yeah. And when we follow our inner truth, when we follow our passion, and when we are persistent, I guarantee you we are successful.
Amen to that. All right, my dear friend, we have a few moments left. I want to kind of transition to the lightning round and then open up to my last question for you today. So, short, punchy. Petra, what does leadership mean to you? Speaking of leadership, as we just discussed.
Leadership to me is inspiring, leading with example, making decisions, not be scared to make a wrong decision. This is better than not making decisions. And caring, serving for the people you are responsible for.
Love that. As a leadership expert, as a leadership student, as an aspiring leader, there's so much to it. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
The commonality, which is a common theme in this episode, is freedom. What would you say, Petra, is your relationship, or how would you define freedom? What's your perspective on it?
I think freedom is essential. Freedom to me is a fundamental right, and freedom deserves to be honored and protected.
Amen.
Thank you.
And before we wrap for today, actually, let me hit my last question and then I'll be able to provide you the space. And you talked a little bit about leadership, so there might be a couple common themes that are redundant, that overlap. But the name of this podcast, which was a source of many, inspiration from many, but certainly you as well, is the CEO Show podcast. So the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a CEO?
To be true to yourself, to do what you know is right to do and do the right thing. And be aware of that freedom that you have, that you are able to do the thing. If I would still live in socialism, I would not have been able to found multiple businesses and develop them to really successful businesses. It's a responsibility, but don't see it as a responsibility. See it as a gift, the freedom that you can unfold and live your passion. Do the things that are the right things.
Let's go, my friends. Oh, doesn't that fire you up? Well, before we wrap today, I want to first, before I acknowledge you, I want to open it up. And I know someone's watching this or hearing this audio, super inspired, wants to continue to follow you. Where's the best place they can find you?
The best place is via the website. It's my name. It's petrafrese.com. And also I'm on social media.
And we'll link all the contact information in the show notes.
Thank you.
And Petra, before we leave today, I just wanted to send you and be able to provide you some acknowledgement, some love, and some praise. Not only for being on this show, which is incredible. We're here live in Beverly Hills. I'm going to have an awesome dinner tonight with you and Dirk and Pablo. We're going to connect tomorrow at the Mastermind and meet more awesome people. But aside from all that, I just want to thank you for inspiring me, for inspiring our audience, for being the person that you are. When I first met you, it was just like the stars aligned. I felt this deep connection. And even so, thank you. And I'm so blown away of your story of resilience, I just honestly believe that God put you in my life, put you on this show, and really inspired me talking about leadership and being a CEO on a path for alignment and purpose. Yeah. You're a big part of that. And I want to acknowledge you, want to acknowledge your story, all the things that you went through. And I definitely think it has a purpose here to inspire others. So that's really how I want to finish out this episode. And I want to acknowledge and thank you and tell God I love you as a friend. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Likewise, absolutely. It's a blessing, vice versa. I'm so grateful for you and the show and what you do for our listeners. And I think that's our passion, to inspire and encourage, to never give up. Trust yourself. Trust yourself and keep going.
Well, I think, my friends, that is a perfect way to segue today. Petra, I want to thank you one more time. And friends, I know you got a ton of value. I have two asks for you, assuming you did. Give this a like and share this with someone that needs a story of inspiration, of perspective. That would mean a lot. And as always, remember that adversity is your advantage, and we'll see you in the next episode.